Joining me now, we have retired Admiral John Kirby, MS Now national security analyst, who's a former spokesperson at the Pentagon, State Department, and the White House. Admiral, it's awfully good to have you on the show here. So your name was invoked earlier in a conversation that I had with our colleague David Rode. And it was suggested that you had verified, and I'd like you just to tell what you know, that Iran had been sending out, I guess, radio calls to ships that are trying to transverse the strait and saying, it's closed, you may not do this. Is that true? And how did they follow that up, if at all?
Yeah, so far what I've been able to gather is that the only harassment that ships have been having as the ships have been transiting, including some 50 today, there's been some radio harassment where the Iranians would get on the radio and tell them it's not safe to go, don't pass, don't do this. They're still trying to extract some sort of fees from ships as they pass, but they are going through safely and with overwatch by the U.S. military on a southern route. If you're looking at that map that you're showing right now, Alex, you'll see that tip of land there coming out from Oman on the very southern part of the strait. You can see all those ships are kind of collected around that area. That's the route by which they're going through the strait, right around that little tip there. So they're not going into the normal separation scheme, which would be to the north and put them in more danger. But my understanding is the only harassment that they're facing right now is over the radio.
So it's my understanding, again, from your description just now, it's syncing up with what a previous guest said, which is, if Josh, you can put that graphic back up, or what we're seeing there on the screen of the strait. So that area around the tip of Oman, as you describe it, that's what the U.S. is saying. The strait's open, things are progressing there, but that northern area that runs closer to the Iranian border, that is what has closed, which basically means what both sides are saying is true. Does that make sense?
No, not exactly. So if you look at that map, right in about the middle of where that elbow is, there's what we call a traffic separation scheme. It's about a 6-mile wide channel through which traffic normally flows. And before the war started, some 130 to 135 ships were going through that scheme. That's right sort of in the middle of that elbow. The ships you're seeing up near the coast of Iran are probably Iranian ships and trying to find a way to run the blockade. But the bulk of the traffic you can see is hanging down around Oman. And there's a little bit of a channel that the U.S. Navy has cleared and is providing overwatch for, just around that tip of Oman. It's not quite as wide as the original traffic separation scheme, but it is safe, and that's the one that the ships are using right now. So it is not fair to say that the strait is closed. Ships are transiting. That said, Alex, we're talking about 50 or some odd ships over the course of today. That's not nothing, but it's not exactly the kind of flow that we were seeing before Mr. Trump started this war. So there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done to make it more accessible to traffic. More critically, there's a lot more that needs to be done to eliminate or mitigate the fear that these shipping companies and their insurers have about free transit through the strait. So we are a long way from saying that the strait is fully open, but it is also not correct to say that it is completely closed.
Okay, so let me pick up on the word fear you just said there, John. What risks do U.S. service members face between trying to navigate mines and directing ship traffic in this very tense environment?
Well, it's important to remember that the U.S. military, the Navy specifically, is not escorting ships through the strait. They're providing what we call overwatch. They maintain an air picture so that they can make sure that there's no threats immediately to the ships that are transiting, and they are in touch with these ships as they are moving through that new separation scheme, if you will. So there's no U.S. military or U.S. Navy ships that are actually in the strait right now. That said, you brought up the mines, and that is a real worry. Where the Iranians laid the mines were in the original 6-mile separation scheme that I was talking about earlier, that lies in the middle kind of that elbow. Those mines have not all been cleared. Some have, not all. The Iranians are not able to get all of them out right now, and the U.S. Navy is working to try to see what they can do to help clear some of those mines, but they are largely floating mines and therefore difficult to find and locate. So there's still a very real threat from mines in the Strait, as well as the threat that the Iranians can still pose with respect to missiles and drones. So that traffic separation scheme, the original one, is still not available for use. And again, the mines are a big reason for that.
Yeah. So Israel today fired new strikes into Lebanon and then later said it was defending itself against Hezbollah attacks, adding that it has no territorial ambitions in Lebanon. But MS Now has learned U.S. intelligence agencies believe Benjamin Netanyahu is likely to continue military action in Lebanon, even if it hinders U.S. peace negotiations. John, is that going to be a problem for President Trump? Is Netanyahu undermining his efforts at peace?
I think probably the only one who wants to see this deal succeed less than the mullahs and the hardliners in Iran is Benjamin Netanyahu and the right-wing elements in his coalition government. They view the threat from Iran as an existential threat, not just a national security threat. And they very much see the threat posed by Hezbollah, which is right across that border, and they are still taking fire from Hezbollah, as existential as well. So it's unlikely that they're going to want to or will be able to minimize completely the threat by Hezbollah or to stop their military operations against Hezbollah. And the idea that Iran can just control Hezbollah with a phone call also doesn't hold water, because Hezbollah doesn't answer to the IRGC in every way, shape, and form. The IRGC in Iran, the Iranian regime, are not a monolith. So I do think that there's a significant risk to the success of this preliminary deal with respect to what's going on between Israel and Hezbollah. And we have to remember that Israel is a nation state of their own. They have their own national interests. Benjamin Netanyahu, whether you like him or hate him, is going to look after those interests. And it's a very popular war he's fighting with Hezbollah. More than 70% of the Israeli people support that. So I think it's going to be very difficult for him to stop dealing with that particular threat. And yes, I think that could definitely pose a threat to the success of the deal writ large.
So the New York Times reports that the Iran war has cost 3,500 Iranian lives, 3,700 Lebanese lives, 13 American lives, and an estimated $132 billion price tag to U.S. taxpayers. The final figure, of course, still being tallied as these peace negotiations begin. Was this a justifiable sacrifice of blood and treasure for the outcome so far?
No, of course not. This was a war that was started unnecessarily and recklessly. It was conducted with tactical brilliance. I think you have to admit that the U.S. military did exactly what they were told to do, and with some effectiveness, but without a strategy, without any kind of long-term thinking, without a careful consideration by the political leadership of the consequences of their actions. And now we're at a state here where we've got a memorandum of understanding to end a war that hasn't been shared with the public, that hasn't been shared with Congress, and that I don't think really will have much of a sustainable way of succeeding without some much more technical work and much more serious negotiations and diplomacy, which, again, it's an open question whether this administration is capable of doing that.
Okay. Retired Admiral John Kirby, we're so glad to have you on our team as an MS Now national security analyst. My friend, if you ever want to have some OT and do it here on the weekends with me, you are welcome anytime. Thank you very much.
Anytime. I'll be happy to come back. Thanks.
Appreciate that.